All right. Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. I'm here to talk about from single to triple pane, why you need why you need multiple panes of glass when you're looking at your cloud technology, AI, etc. costs. My name is Larry Advey, also known as Fred FinOps. I'm the director of cloud platform and FinOps at CloudZero. I am a technical advisory council member with the FinOps Foundation, and I'm also a focus maintainer. Really happy to be here today. Partnered with Victor in the past on various things, and we jumping in. The agenda today, so we'll be going through this thought I've had for a while around. Talked a lot about single panes of glass in the past, and I don't think it's prescriptive enough. So I'm breaking it out into three different panes and talking about those, and then talking about how to get to value at the end of the day, at the end of the story. Right? FinOps is a lot about the data. There's a story with the data, and every company is different, but there are things that are very similar. A great way to begin is with questions. So asking some key questions around who, what, when, why, with costs, with technology, with all of this stuff, right? Comes up quite often in various different ways, different shapes, different forms, different contexts, different personas. And more specifically, a question I run into often is, what am I approving? Like, what am I looking at here? I don't understand what I'm seeing with this invoice or this data. And an extension from this is then like, why is my bill X dollars, euros, cents, whatever, right? This one comes up a lot. The what, the whys, and once you understand, or maybe you don't, right? Why is my bill X, Y, and Z? Then it evolves to a deeper. Why did we spend X on this thing? There's some sort of disconnect there. And when you start getting deeper in your cloud spend and asking these powerful questions, one question that comes up, which is a great question to ask, is this good or bad spend? This is a hard question to answer at times. Good spend, bad spend. Just looking at, something costs $500 versus $50,000 or 100,000 euros. It's hard to tell, is this good or bad? But effectively, what you're driving really towards at the end of the day is this valuable? Is what we're doing here valuable? What we're paying for? Yes or no? And a lot of questions there, but where to begin? So one place to look is ask another question. Where can you find all of your costs today? Most small to large enterprises have this thing that has all the costs, and that is these enterprise resource and planning systems, ERP systems. But they're mostly used by accounting, finance, supply chain, HR, and others. But you start looking into those systems, like what type of data do they have? And why doesn't everyone use these systems? Because it's got all the data and information. It's like, well, why don't they use it? Well, the data itself is a lot of accounting codes, general ledgers, inventories. The data is very valuable. Companies run off of this information. Decisions are made off of it. However, enter FinOps. Like, why does FinOps exist? Why are we here? Well, the ERP data and the user experience doesn't jive well with engineering, product, IT, and others. So engineers love debugging code, but getting an engineer or just diving into and debugging financial data is hard. It's challenging. And it doesn't relate well to the amount of granularity and detail that we need for cloud and usage-based services that change by the second, by the hour, daily, right? So enter the FinOps framework. This is a great framework to look at, and it has grown tremendously over the past several years. It's produced by the FinOps Foundation, iterated by nearly 100,000 people over these many years. There's a lot here, but how do you begin? What's that first step? And looking at this, it's not entirely clear until you start actually trying to digest it, reading the book, different webinars, the training, et cetera, but really jumping into the understand usage and cost domain and focusing on data ingestion, allocation, reporting, and analytics. You can't understand what you don't look at, what you don't try to visualize and consume. So starting with the data is a great place to start. And again, there are questions that come up when you start looking at that, where what am I approving? And why is my bill X amount of dollars? So you can help answer some of these things by having a single pane of glass. The single pane of glass effectively being having all costs in one place. I mentioned an ERP system that has all costs in one place. However, you can't go from a 50,000-foot view down to the actual resources in cloud, AI, token usage, SaaS, account usage, et cetera, within ERP systems. So while surface value, it's like, oh, let's go over here and look at this system that's got all the information. It doesn't have the value that, or the detail and granularity to be successful. So there are challenges with this. And a lot of this has to do with how much data do you have? So how many clouds, AI providers now, right? In the past couple of years, AI is, it's all the rage. What are we spending over here, right? And we're using all sorts of different tools. There's no clear winner within the environment, the world, SaaS vendors, other vendors, and FinOps scopes. That's been expanding more officially within the FinOps framework as well. And boiling this down, effectively, and I've talked about this too in various capacities, use what you have today, native tools, things like that. But it really benefits to sit down and strategize and think, well, what am I going to do in 6 months or 12 months? Or maybe even sooner than that, right? What are my next 5 steps? And as related to a certain virtual character named Link 39 years ago, it's dangerous to go alone. And there are tools available to help. And some of these tools you'll recognize here, one being Focus, I've got on the screen. Again, I'm a maintainer of Focus. And CloudZero also has a data model called AnyCost that they're very, very similar. And they work well together. And CloudZero does support Focus. We can ingest Focus data. But it's a single format for all of your disparate vendors, your AI spend, your cloud, et cetera, et cetera. And Focus is definitely still evolving. 1.3 is coming out here imminently. A lot of really excitement there, right? And CloudZero has AnyCost that can do with that. But start with what you have, the native tools. But thinking ahead, today, maybe I'm really concerned about my cloud provider because we spend most of our money there. But we've seen practitioners will do very great successful things with single panes of glass and further from there, providing a lot of value back to their companies, back to their stakeholders, and then they get asked to do more. So then it becomes, well, how do I bring over my data platform costs, my observability costs, other costs into the one umbrella within FinOps? And so thinking about this down the road becomes really strategic and importance. CloudZero helps put the spend in the context of your business. And I'm really focusing on this left side of this view here today within this journey. where you're ingesting the data from various different sources, bringing it together in a single data model so that things aren't disparate and spread across, right? Cost data is very similar across cloud, SaaS, et cetera, et cetera. And so, but being able to bring that together into one single pane of glass, then you could start poking down and experimenting with the information and seeing what's out there, to where you could look at, well, how much am I spending by provider? GCP, Azure, AWS, OpenAI, Anthropic, Snowflake, Datadog, Databricks, et cetera, et cetera. Or also by flipping this differently, service category across these providers. What am I spending for AI, for databases, for compute, for storage? And with this information, you can perform analysis and benchmarking to kind of look at potentially like which is cheaper, right? But we're still missing some data to really help drive this forward. But it also begs the question, why did we spend X on Y? So we need something more to help with this, to help the, like, what's the information we need? What's the data we need to take this to the next step, the next level? Second pane of glass. And the second pane of glass is effectively the business context. The business context being, what's the data, what's the information that provides meaning to the cost data? And it helps answer the why. Why this, why that? So it's your allocations. And this is a great starting point. You get all the data in one place. Now you have to worry about allocating it, using tags, using labels, resource names, account names, additional metadata, whatever it is. But once you start going down this path and you iterate through it, and the FinOps Foundation talks about this quite extensively within its trainings, the documentation, all this. You're iterating on allocations and getting to the point where you're providing value or providing insights into the information. And it allows you to finally start viewing your data by teams. So here on this screenshot from our platform, I've got one team in blue there, Team Bravo. It's got the vast majority of the cost and spend. So when someone asks, well, how can we optimize things, or how could we reduce costs? How could we make things more efficient? Looking at this information, I say, well, let's talk to Team Bravo, because they spend 90+%. They're responsible 90+% of the spend, the cost. But if you could flip this as well to say, okay, within Team Bravo, or within the total amount of spend, what are our internal versus external costs? Looking at this information, you can derive that most of the costs are external, being that they're not internally generated, so they're not R&D. So they're likely, if this is a technology company, that they're likely customer generated costs, which is a good thing. We're not burning money internally with R&D, doing experiments and doing all that. And if internal was really high, it could be good, could be bad. Maybe you're spiking on something. The company is investing a lot of time and effort into certain new capabilities. Like, we hear tons of investment in AI nowadays, these AI companies. And they have to work towards proving out their business model at the end of the day. But looking under the hood, I would expect their R&D costs to be significantly higher, the internal R&D costs to be higher than how things are externally facing. And so there's this kind of push and pull to understand that costs. And it's really great context to look at, and being able to slice and dice by teams, by this. And then also by customers, flipping this again. Understanding you're a technology company, you sell something, whatever, you provide value back to other people. Your top customers here, Wayne Enterprises takes the cheese. Providing this type of information can be very straightforward or difficult depending on how the data is organized or how things are architected. So you may have a multi-tenant environment, you may not, you may have shared resources, you may not. And so having FinOps and bringing FinOps in closer to those decisions as they're being made is crucial as part of the conversation. But if you're not there, looking at the data and getting towards answering questions is paramount to running your business, being profitable, being successful, being valuable at the end of the day. But there's still questions that remain. We're not quite there yet. So going back to, is this good or bad spend? This is a fantastic question that all finance practitioners should be thinking about. And I'll be honest, I got this from a finance gentleman that I used to work with. Fantastic person. It's like, Larry, is this good or bad spend? That's what I want. I want to answer this. Are we making money off of this? Yes or no? Or is this maybe erroneous? Is this maybe you've got some fraudulent work within your systems that's causing costs to spike? Is it someone forgot to turn the EC2 instance off, right? Insert meme here. Like, what can we do to make this and put this over from bad to good? But answering the question, it can be hard to answer that question. And then by extension, really what he's asking for is, or their people are asking for is this valuable? Value is hard. There are lots of different ways to look and slice and dice by value. Some are objective, some are subjective, right? If you're a for-profit business, being profitable, GAAP profitable is good, right? But trying to say, is this valuable from an ethics perspective, love, art, utility, like this graphic here? The subjective items can be challenging to quantify. And at the end of the day, is the thing that we're selling worth it for others to buy versus perhaps making themselves? And you got to think about this. We make decisions about this every single day. We're out driving around, walking around, eating at this restaurant, going to this venue. Is this worth it for me to exchange the money for this? Am I going to get value from this time? Is this a short-term or long-term investment? And with value, getting from where you've got nothing, effectively zero, to understanding this is value is important. So going from zero to value is key, and doing this as quickly as possible is even better. So if it takes a lot of time for it to get something ramped up, to get something going, to get to your value and understanding, or being able to iterate, it's even more challenging. There are short-term things like we need to spike on optimizations, like where are we spending our money at? How can we optimize it? But at a certain point, you've optimized the infrastructure. You've optimized your licenses, your seat counts, your tokens, your contracts. Well, what's left? Shifting over to something like unit economics or getting that going at the same time, because unit economics does take a bit of time to do, or it can. You can spike on this, you can easily, just depends on the platform and things, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But thinking about FinOps as just optimizations, that's short-term mindset. And you want to think about optimizations as things are running within operations, but then operate FinOps like a business. And having that visibility, having those conversations with not only finance, but engineering, with leadership and others, all these different personas. But to really truly evaluate value within our companies, our lives and things, we need more information. This is where the third pane of glass comes in, the final form, I'll say at this point. Going back to the FinOps framework, I believe you really have to pull in the quantified business and value domain, more specifically, the planning and estimating and unit economics capabilities. So being able to estimate, plan, iterate, looking at your historical data versus current versus future information, things like that. And then coupling that together with unit economics, your cost per something. What's that KPI? What's that metric? Is it cost per customer, transaction, account, per gigabyte, vCPU, token? And to bring all that together, what you really need is supplemental data. And I made this very generic for a reason, because there's no one size fits all, but there are commonalities. We can't change what we don't understand, and we don't understand what we don't measure. With this supplemental data, you can enable then actionable insights and the ability for data-driven decisions. Two huge buzzwords there: actionable insights, data-driven decisions. But having the information available and there for people, then you can actually take action on it. You can actually do something with it, and then help determine value, yes or no, good spend, bad spend, yes or no. A great place to start is revenue. Revenue is often, a very, very important number. Higher revenues, generally better, right? You want costs to go down, you want revenue to go up. And when I think about costs and revenue, they're two sides of the same coin. And with your first two panes of glass, you have all these costs and all this context and detailed information. The third pane, you bring in revenue. And that allows you to start calculating things like margin, profit. And from a very financial sense, do we have good spend or bad spend? And then you can slice and dice that by product, by team, by feature, other things. But with that, there's also additional information that can really help drive success forward. And what drives costs is key to understand and to hypothesize, to experiment with, and then nail down what really drives costs. And sometimes you have to iterate on this to maybe change some things. So if you're looking at your number of accounts, your number of customers, transactions, I'll say Fred, crushing boulders, units sold, other. There is some number that drives costs up and down, or should drive costs up or down. If you've got static workloads, costs never change. But you hypothesize that more customers, more cost, and that's not actually happening. It's like, why isn't that happening? What workload should be changing? And then you're able to optimize, inform, and start diving down into engaging those conversations. You can be very creative with this. You should experiment and think outside the box on what to do here. But the question becomes, like, how do you measure these things? How do you bring all this data together? And in this third pane of glass, CloudZero has this capability called telemetry, where we're able to integrate all this supplemental data together and answer this difficult problem, where it's not just unit data, counts of this versus that, but other data, to where you can calculate easily cost per feature, transaction, customer, profit, margin. Use this information as well to drive shared cost allocations or other things. Into where having I'll say an extensible data model and a flexible platform that allows you to be very creative within your scope, within your business. But what kind of data can you load into there It's that accounts, the customers, etc. But once you do that, you could start creating some different views where you could show margin by customer over time and see, is this good spend? Is this bad spend? You can color code it. Green is good, red is bad. And you see here with these 26 customers on this example, the left and the right, if you're looking at margin and margin determines good or bad, then you can see that on the right side here, we've got some red. There's some opportunities there. With this, you can make decisions. Say, well, can we optimize this particular customer? How? Why? Is it something within our platform? They're doing something special? Like, what is it that's driving their margins specifically so low versus others? Or others are so successful? So looking at this back and forth. Then you can track and flip things differently and look at, I've used token as an example within this graph. Cost per token over cost, over cost. So you see the cost per token going up and down over time, costs remaining relatively stable, but then changing the perspective and looking at it by the number of tokens with the cost per tokens being used and generated provides a different view. It tells a story. Costs aren't always changing based off usage. So these don't correlate, like your cloud costs, for instance, right? And that can be okay that this happens. But with this information, if you're expecting your cost per transaction or your cost per unit sold or cost per customer, cost per account to go up or down based off of whether there's more or less, with this information, you can derive, are you doing this or not? But then finally, like, what do you do with this information? When do you insert this, or where do you insert this into? And there are various forms of a product development lifecycle. Created this image here where you start with an idea, doing research, design, development, etc., where you're going around, right? It's a circular, iterative is the point. It's an iterative cycle. You must iterate through this. But which is the most important step? It can also be the hardest without the information, without the data, as I've been talking about. I think it should be no surprise it's the measure step. If you're not measuring things, you don't understand it, you can't improve, you can't iterate. And I'll say more importantly, you can't pivot. You don't have that data to pivot. Pivoting allows you to look at, and this is to say, is this good spend or bad spend? And you can make those strategic decisions to keep investing in something that's good, it's providing value, or diverging from something that's not. With that, you discover actionable insights. You have them at your fingertips. You have all the data you need to make those core business decisions where you're optimizing not only individual products, teams, etc., but the business as a whole. And you're able to make that very transparent across lots of personas and things, where starting, like I mentioned earlier, starting with an ERP system where there's some numbers there, but it's not really usable by engineering. But bringing that together into a FinOps platform that has a data model that's extensible and flexible, then you're able to get to these insights where you can look at the graphs, look at the numbers. Data doesn't lie. It can be wrong, but it doesn't lie. Using them and being able to then win at the end of the day. You're winning with your triple pane of glass. You have all the information. You're able to then iterate. You're able to then track things operationally over time as the business evolves, as things change, because they always do. So what? Ask questions. I talked about several that come up, and it could, like, there's no bad question, I'll say, because it can trigger lots of great conversations. Answer the questions with data. If you don't have the data, learn how you can get it. Reach out and talk to the architects, the engineers, the product people, finance, whomever. Find where that's at, learn that. Driving impact through value helps out very significantly. FinOps typically starts with cloud. You're evolving from there to something else to where you could be easily responsible for well over 100 vendors. And FinOps is causing this transformation of evolution. And finally, iterating through this. I think you've got what you need, and you're done. You need to keep pushing and keep evolving and iterating through it, making it operational. So that's my chat, going from single pane of glass to triple. And please connect with me on LinkedIn. If you have questions, we can chat about whatever. And I'm here to help.